The frogs died and were gathered up in heaps for burning by the domestic slaves. Egypt reeked of rotting frogs and fish. Moses and Aaron went to a deserted place, where Aaron struck the dust of the ground with Moses' staff. The dust became a plague of stinging gnats that covered man and beast in Egypt. The magicians tried to prove that it was another trick, but they could not produce gnats with their enchantments. One of them even told Pharaoh that he believed that God was causing the plague. That magician was confined to his quarters. Hippolytus scribed the discussion. That evening, he returned to his room and continued his journal of events. He looked up from his writing to see Jabari standing in the doorway. "What are you writing? I hope it is not confidential matters of court." "I am merely recording my thoughts about our suffering," answered Hippolytus somewhat untruthfully. Jabari walked in briskly, bent down, and looked into Hippolytus' eyes. "If you are caught saying anything negative about Pharaoh, you will be killed," he whispered. Hippolytus met his gaze but didn't answer. Jabari slowly slipped the papyrus from Hippolytus' hands, folded it small, and hid it in the palm of his hand. He left the room. Jabari read the document, then concealed it in a secret compartment in his cabinet, along with some of his own writings. As the beating and deaths of the Hebrews continued, so did the plagues. Following the gnats was a plague of scarab beetles. Many Hebrews feared that the plagues might affect them, because they felt that God had nothing to do with them. As Pharaoh's heart was hard, he repeatedly refused to let the Hebrews leave. Following the scarabs was a disease on all the animals of Egypt: cattle, horses, donkeys, camels, oxen, and sheep. Next came a plague of boils that broke out in sores on the Egyptians and their animals. Moses appeared before Pharaoh, but as before, Pharaoh would not heed the warnings or release the slaves. The magicians were not even able to stand up because their boils were so painful. Hippolytus was scribing from his cushion seat in great discomfort. There was an oppressive heat. Sweat trickled down the center of his back. He stopped scribing briefly and studied Moses. It didn't seem to him that Moses was just a shepherd. After Moses left the palace, he stretched out his staff toward heaven, as God then instructed. Without warning, the sky turned black and the clouds were low. Pharaoh's throne room turned dark, so that Hippolytus could not see to write. An eerie feeling crept over him. Pharaoh shifted uneasily on his throne. It began to rain heavily. Then came huge hailstones, large enough to destroy the crops. An unnatural fire shot down from the clouds and ran along the ground. The women of the court screamed. The roads filled up with ice. Hippolytus had never seen anything like it. In the palace, the darkness was as night. In the midst of the storm, Pharaoh called for Moses. Soldiers ran to bring him. No storm was affecting the Hebrews, and the sun was shining over Goshen. Moses came to Pharaoh, who said, "I admit this time that I have sinned. Your God Jehovah is righteous, and we Egyptians are all sinful. Entreat God to end this hail before we have no crops left." Moses answered, "I will, but I see that you are not being sincere." When the storm eased, Pharaoh resumed his arrogant position. He went out to consult the Nile, standing on the bottom step of his porch beside the water. The Nile was flowing red with mud after the storm. For a moment he started, thinking that the blood had come back.